What if I told you there's a place where some marriage customs defy modern expectations, where cow dung symbolizes wealth, and where children are contacted to glacier water in unique rites of passage? This isn't fiction, it's Tibet, the roof of the world, where everyday life can seem extraordinary. In this video, we explore 15 rare and fascinating practices found only in this remote, snow-covered land. Some will surprise you, others may challenge what you thought you knew about culture. Let's start with something that will absolutely blow your mind. In traditional Tibetan culture, young women are encouraged to have intimate relationships with at least 20 different men before they're considered eligible for marriage. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds completely made up, right? But this tradition exists because Tibetans believe that marrying an inexperienced woman brings terrible luck and disaster to the husband's family. So instead of preserving purity like many cultures do, Tibetan women must prove their experience and collect tokens from each encounter as evidence. Even more uniquely, some families practice polyandry, where one woman marries multiple brothers. The eldest often acts as the primary husband, while younger siblings share the same marital responsibilities. This custom helped preserve family land and minimize conflict in Tibet's demanding environment. While it may seem complex from a modern perspective, these traditions reflect deeply rooted strategies for survival and social cohesion. I'm not joking when I say that in Tibet, the more cow dung covering your house walls, the wealthier you're considered to be. Houses with their exterior walls completely covered in what looks like brown patches, the first instinct might be disgust, but locals see dollar signs. Each patch represents livestock ownership, and livestock equals wealth in this harsh mountain environment. Tibetan cow dung doesn't smell bad like you'd expect. Because the yaks and cows eat only pure grass and drink crystal clear mountain water, sometimes even consuming valuable cordyceps, their waste actually smells like dried grass when burned. There are actually cow dung cakes that tourists line up to try. Yes, you heard that right. The locals swear it's not only safe but beneficial, though I'll let you decide if you're brave enough to add that to your travel bucket list. Now we're entering territory that may challenge your assumptions, but it reveals something profound about Tibetan philosophy. Instead of traditional burial or cremation, Tibetans often practice what's known as sky burial. In this sacred ritual, the body of the deceased is respectfully prepared by trained practitioners and placed on a mountaintop to be offered to vultures. This is not an act of violence, but one of deep compassion. Tibetans believe the soul has already moved on, and the body, now an empty vessel, can serve one final purpose, nourishing other living beings. It's a powerful reflection of Buddhist values, where selflessness and the cycle of life are central. Sky burial is also practical. Tibet's harsh terrain makes burial difficult and fuel for cremation scarce. This tradition evolved both from spiritual belief and environmental necessity. And in a symbolic sense, when the vultures take flight, it's seen as carrying the soul toward the heavens. What do you think about this practice? Does it change your perspective on death and our relationship with nature? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'm genuinely curious about your reactions to these incredible cultural differences. Here's something that sounds impossible in our modern world. There's a city in Tibet called Naga that covers over 160,000 square kilometers, has 500,000 residents, and yet doesn't have a single living tree. Even the most barren deserts manage to support some form of plant life, but Naga has defeated every attempt at growing trees for thousands of years. It's not that people don't know how to plant or don't want greenery. Trees literally cannot survive there. Located at over 4,500 meters above sea level, Naga experiences some of the harshest conditions on our planet. The ground remains permanently frozen, making it impossible for roots to penetrate. Local authorities have even offered rewards worth hundreds of thousands of yuan to anyone who can successfully grow a tree that survives a full winter. Despite countless attempts and significant investment, the reward remains unclaimed. Now we're entering territory that borders on the supernatural. Mount Kailash in Tibet isn't just any mountain. It's a place where mathematics, spirituality, and mystery collide in ways that make scientists scratch their heads in confusion. Mount Kailash stands at exactly 6,666 meters tall. The distance from Kailash to Stonehenge is exactly 6,666 kilometers. The distance to the North Pole is also 6,666 kilometers. The distance to the South Pole is precisely double that at 13,332 kilometers. But wait, it gets stranger. The distance between the famous Mexican Pyramid and Egypt's Great Pyramid is exactly 3 times the distance from the Great Pyramid to Kailash. The distance from Kailash to Easter Island is exactly 3 times the length of Stonehenge. Despite being a relatively modest peak by Himalayan standards, no human has ever successfully climbed to its summit. Some climbers report that their compasses spin wildly near the peak. Others claim time seems to move differently. Local Tibetans consider the mountain so sacred that they believe climbing it would bring catastrophic consequences not just to the climber but to the entire world. In Tibet, people greet each other by sticking out their tongues, and the reason behind this practice is both fascinating and dark. The tradition dates back to the 9th century and a king named Lang Dharma, who was known for his cruelty and persecution of Buddhists. According to legend, this evil king had a tongue as black as coal. When he died, Tibetans became terrified that he might reincarnate among them. So they developed a simple test. By sticking out their tongues when meeting someone new, they could prove their tongue wasn't black, demonstrating they weren't the reincarnated evil king. Today, when Tibetans stick out their tongues, they're essentially saying, "I come in peace. I'm not harboring evil intentions." It's a gesture of openness and goodwill that has survived over 1,000 years. If you're enjoying these incredible cultural discoveries, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because we're just getting started. And the next few revelations are going to challenge everything you think you know about human adaptation and survival. In parts of Tibet, there's a traditional rite involving children that reflects the region's extreme climate and cultural resilience. On a child's first birthday, the most respected woman in the village may bring them to a glacial stream, gently immersing the body, except for the head, in cold water for a brief moment. This ceremony is believed to help strengthen their connection to nature and demonstrate their ability to adapt to the environment. If they react strongly and remain alert, it is seen as a positive sign of vitality. If they appear weak or unresponsive, it is met with concern and care, reflecting the community's deep awareness of the challenges of survival at high altitudes. Tibetan populations have developed genetic adaptations traced back to the Denisovan lineage that allow them to process oxygen efficiently and tolerate extreme cold. These traits help explain how communities have thrived in such a demanding landscape. Here's an irony that perfectly captures Tibet's unique position in the world. Despite being famous for butter tea, a drink that's absolutely central to Tibetan culture and survival, Tibet cannot grow a single tea plant. Butter tea is literally liquid life for Tibetans. It provides essential calories, helps retain body heat in freezing temperatures, and supplies crucial nutrients that allow people to survive at altitudes where most humans would perish. Yet every single tea leaf has to be transported from thousands of kilometers away. This created one of history's most legendary trade routes. The Tea Horse Road stretched nearly 400 kilometers from India through some of the world's most treacherous mountain passes. Traders would exchange precious horses for tea, creating a lifeline that connected Tibet to the outside world. But here's what makes this story even more incredible. The tea that finally reached Tibet after this epic journey wasn't just brewed normally. Tibetans developed their own unique preparation method, churning the tea with yak butter and salt to create a drink that's more like soup than anything we'd recognize as tea. This butter tea became so essential that Tibetans drink dozens of cups per day. It's offered to guests, consumed during prayers, and serves as both food and beverage in a land where traditional agriculture is impossible. You've probably seen images of colorful flags fluttering against Tibet's brilliant blue sky, but these aren't just decorations. They're called Lung Ta prayer flags, and they represent one of the most beautiful spiritual practices on earth. Each flag is covered with mantras and prayers, with a wind horse symbol in the center representing the 3 jewels of Buddhism. In the 4 corners you'll find sacred animals, the Garuda bird symbolizing wisdom, a dragon representing power, a tiger for faith, and a snow lion embodying fearlessness. But these flags aren't meant to last forever. As they fade and deteriorate in the harsh mountain weather, Tibetans believe the prayers written on them are carried by the wind to benefit all living beings. The more weathered the flag becomes, the more prayers have been released into the universe. There's a strict protocol around these flags that reveals deep spiritual beliefs. If you see a prayer flag that has fallen to the ground, you should never step on it. Instead, you should pick it up and hang it in a high place, or better yet, take it to a local family who can properly dispose of it. But timing matters crucially. Hanging prayer flags on the wrong day is believed to create obstacles and bring misfortune. There are specific auspicious days when flags should be hung, and getting this wrong can supposedly cause more harm than good. Historically, Lungta flags were so valuable that when a son got married, families would give him prayer flags as part of his dowry. They were considered more precious than material possessions because they represented spiritual wealth and protection. Tibet is considered the home of the Yeti, and despite decades of scientific expeditions and investigations, this legend continues to captivate people worldwide. The evidence is tantalizing but never quite conclusive. Large footprints in the snow that don't match any known animal. Thick, unusual hair samples that DNA analysis can't definitively identify. Blurry photographs and shaky video footage that could be anything. Even preserved bodies in ice that turn out to be elaborate hoaxes or misidentified animals. But here's what makes the Yeti legend particularly interesting in Tibet. Local people don't treat it as a myth or a tourist attraction. For many Tibetans, the Yeti is simply part of their reality, as natural as yaks or snow leopards. Numerous scientific expeditions have searched Tibet's most remote regions, using everything from thermal cameras to DNA analysis equipment. Some have found intriguing evidence, others have returned empty-handed, but none have provided the definitive proof that would settle the question once and for all. What's your take on this? Do you think there's something out there in Tibet's remote wilderness? Or is the Yeti just a product of human imagination and cultural storytelling? Let me know in the comments because this debate has been raging for decades with passionate believers on both sides. Lhasa, Tibet's capital, is home to one of the most architecturally impossible buildings ever constructed. The Potala Palace appears to defy the laws of physics, rising from a mountain like it grew there naturally rather than being built by human hands. This isn't just impressive architecture. It's a 13-story fortress containing over 1,000 rooms, built at an altitude where most people struggle to breathe, using construction techniques that modern engineers still don't fully understand. The palace served as the winter residence of the Dalai Lamas for centuries, but it's also a masterpiece of engineering that shouldn't exist. Every single building material had to be carried up a mountain by hand. The extreme weather conditions meant construction could only happen during brief windows of favorable weather. Yet somehow, Tibetan builders created a structure so stable it has survived earthquakes, wars, and centuries of harsh weather. The palace contains two main sections, the White Palace for administrative functions and the Red Palace for religious ceremonies. Inside, you'll find murals, artworks, tombs, and chapels that represent centuries of Tibetan culture and Buddhist philosophy. But since the current Dalai Lama went into exile, the palace has been preserved as a museum, but it still serves as a spiritual center that attracts pilgrims from around the world. People travel thousands of kilometers just to walk through its halls and experience the spiritual energy that permeates every room. Here's a fact that will completely change how you think about Tibet's global importance. This remote, sparsely populated region provides fresh water for nearly half of the world's population. Tibet contains the third largest concentration of fresh water on Earth, after the North and South Poles. That's why it's often called the Third Pole. The massive glaciers and snowfields of the Tibetan Plateau feed into Asia's most crucial river systems, the Brahmaputra, Ganges, Indus, Mekong, Salween, and Yangtze rivers. These rivers don't just provide water for drinking. They support agriculture, industry, and entire civilizations across multiple countries. Over 2 billion people depend on water that originates in Tibet's mountains and glaciers. That's nearly 47% of humanity relying on this single region for their most basic survival need. But climate change is causing Tibet's glaciers to melt at an unprecedented rate. Scientists warn that if current trends continue, many of these glaciers could disappear within decades, creating a water crisis that would affect billions of people. The lakes and rivers of Tibet, like Lake Namso and Lake Yamdrak, aren't just beautiful tourist destinations. They're crucial reservoirs that regulate water flow throughout Asia. When these water sources are threatened, the consequences ripple across continents. One of the most fascinating aspects of Tibetan culture is the systematic search for reincarnated spiritual leaders. The process of finding the next Dalai Lama isn't random or purely mystical, it follows specific protocols and tests. When a Dalai Lama dies, senior monks seek out signs left by the deceased, such as poems, prophecies, or personal objects that may indicate the location of the reincarnation. Search teams then travel to remote villages, often guided by visions reported by high-ranking lamas. When they find a potential candidate, usually a young child, they conduct tests to confirm the identity. The child must recognize items that belong to the previous Dalai Lama, display unusual knowledge, and exhibit particular traits. The current 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, was identified as a toddler from a farming family and brought to Lhasa, where he received a comprehensive education to prepare him for spiritual and political leadership. This system stands out in global governance. Leadership is based not on birthright or wealth, but on the belief that certain souls return to serve humanity. Despite political challenges and foreign occupation, this tradition has sustained a stable spiritual institution for centuries. Let's talk about a grain that most people have never heard of, but which represents one of humanity's greatest agricultural achievements. Tibetan barley, or highland barley, is the only crop that can reliably grow at altitudes between 3,000 and 5,000 meters above sea level. Tibetan barley has been genetically adapted over thousands of years to survive. It can handle extreme cold, intense UV radiation from the thin atmosphere, and growing seasons so short that most crops wouldn't have time to mature. The nutritional profile of this barley is extraordinary. It contains higher levels of protein, fiber, and essential amino acids than lowland grains. Most importantly, it provides lysine, an essential amino acid that the human body cannot produce on its own. From this single grain, Tibetans create an entire cuisine. Sampa, roasted barley flour, serves as the foundation for countless dishes. There are thukpa noodles, various breads, and even chang, a fermented barley beer that provides both nutrition and alcohol in a land where other sources of calories are scarce. Tibetan barley is considered a symbol of prosperity, luck, and longevity. The grain appears in religious ceremonies, traditional festivals, and spiritual rituals. It represents the connection between human survival and the harsh but generous land of Tibet. Our final revelation brings us to one of Tibet's most visually stunning and spiritually significant features: monasteries and temples built on seemingly impossible mountain peaks, as if they're reaching directly toward heaven. These aren't just impressive architectural achievements. They represent a fundamental Tibetan belief that mountains are the dwelling places of gods and the most sacred locations for worship and prayer. By building temples on peaks, Tibetans create physical bridges between the earthly and divine realms. The construction of these mountain monasteries required engineering solutions that modern builders still admire. Every stone, every piece of timber, every decorative element had to be carried up treacherous mountain paths by human porters. The thin air made physical labor exhausting, and weather conditions often made construction impossible for months at a time. Monasteries like Rongbuk, perched near Mount Everest, or the Tiger's Nest in Bhutan, seem to defy gravity as they cling to cliff faces and mountain ridges. These buildings don't just exist in the landscape, they become part of it, creating harmony between human spiritual aspirations and natural grandeur. These high-altitude monasteries serve multiple purposes beyond worship. They're centers of learning where monks study philosophy, medicine, and astronomy. They're repositories of ancient texts and artworks. They're also refuges where people can retreat from the world to focus on spiritual development. So there you have 15 incredible, mysterious, and sometimes shocking things that exist nowhere else on Earth except in Tibet. From marriage customs that defy conventional morality to architectural achievements that seem impossible, Tibet continues to challenge our assumptions about human culture and adaptation. What surprised you most? Which of these revelations made you want to learn more about this incredible region? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through one of Earth's most mysterious places, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible discoveries from around our amazing planet. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.